Vaccinations alone will not be enough to stop Omicron, warns the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control. It's calling for strong action as the EU predicts the variant will be dominant across the bloc by mid-January. The UK records its highest daily number of infections since the start of the pandemic, the day after a Conservative rebellion over coronavirus restrictions.
German police investigate an online group of anti-vaccine protesters who had allegedly plotted to kill the state governor.
And jailed Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny is awarded the Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought. His team tells Euronews that it is probably the first time that the fight against corruption has been recognised as a human rights fight. Strong action is needed to halt the spread of the Omicron variant, the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control has warned. The health agency says relying on vaccinations alone will not be enough. Cases linked to the variant have been reported in at least 77 countries. The ECDC urged European countries to administer booster doses to all eligible people as soon as possible and said wearing face masks, remote working and reducing crowds in public spaces will also help reduce the numbers of infections. It added that the contact tracing should be prioritised as a key measure to help stop the spread of the new variant.
There will be no time to address the vaccination gaps that still exist. It is urgent that strong action is taken to reduce transmission and alleviate the heavy burden on healthcare systems and protect the most vulnerable in the coming months.
But the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen insists that the bloc is ready to tackle the new variant. 66.6% of the EU's population is fully vaccinated and countries are ramping up efforts to increase this. Ben Brown reports.
As hospitals across Europe struggle with the surge in COVID cases, the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, is warning Omicron will become the most prominent strain in only a matter of weeks.
If you look at the time it takes for new cases to double in number, it seems to be doubling every 2 or 3 days, and that's massive. We're told that by mid-January we should expect Omicron to be the new dominant variant in Europe.
But she says the EU is well prepared to fight Omicron, with 2/3 of the European population now fully jabbed against the virus. It comes as a handful of countries, including Greece, Germany, Portugal, Hungary and Spain, have started vaccinating children under the age of 12, following the European Medicines Agency giving its approval to the Pfizer shots for youngsters last month. Meanwhile, in France, the government says 400,000 people over the age of 65 who were eligible for a third dose and haven't had it now risk losing their COVID passports. The measure will be extended to all French adults on January the 15th. Ben Brown, Euronews.
In Italy, the Prime Minister insists that pre-departure COVID-19 tests have become necessary once again. All travellers to Italy, including those who are fully vaccinated and travelling from within the European Union, must now show evidence of a rapid antigen test or a PCR test upon arrival. Well, for more on this, our correspondent Giorgia Orlandi joins us now from Rome. So, Giorgia, why the tightening of restrictions now? What are Mario Draghi's justifications for restrictions, especially on arrivals from other EU countries?
Hi, Mariam. Well, it seems that the Italian government is really determined to step up its efforts against COVID-19, given the sharp rise in the number of infections in the last few days. Yesterday, the government approved the extension of the nation's state of emergency until the end of March 2022, which means that Parliament is allowed to introduce, revoke or implement emergency measures to contain the spread of the virus. And on the 6th of December, the so-called Super Green Pass came into effect, which is a reinforced version of Italy's Green Pass, Italy's health certificate showing one person has been fully vaccinated against COVID, has recovered from the disease or has tested negative for COVID. But the main difference, as we know, is that this Super Green Pass only applies to those people who have been fully vaccinated or have recovered from the disease. In other words, those people who have not been vaccinated won't get access to a number of venues. And from today, those those working in schools, police, military, emergency services will be required to get vaccinated. And those people who don't comply with the rule could face sanctions, including suspension from work without pay. But as you mentioned there, restrictions also have been imposed on travellers. In particular, the Italian government has announced that from Thursday, any incoming visitors arriving from the EU will have to take a pre-departure COVID test, and those people who have not been vaccinated will have to quarantine for 5 days. Now, the move, according to the Vice President of the European Commission, will be likely discussed at the next European Council meeting, and she hopes that these won't undermine people's trust in the existence of common rules within the EU. Italy's Prime Minister Mario Draghi said that the new measure has become necessary as clearly the Italian government is concerned about how quickly the new variant is spreading over here.
OK, Georgia, thanks for that update from Rome. Thank you so much. The UK has recorded 78,610 new coronavirus infections, its highest ever daily number, a day after the Prime Minister suffered the biggest rebellion of his premiership. Boris Johnson faced a tough Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday after at least 99 Conservative rebels voted against his Plan B restrictions, citing concerns about personal freedoms. The bill eventually passed with support from opposition parties, but Boris Johnson sought to defend his record on the pandemic.
We've cut the timetable in half. Monday was the biggest vaccination Monday in the history of this country, and yesterday was the second biggest vaccination achievement by the NHS ever. More than 500,000 jabs delivered, and the campaign continues to grow. I want to thank absolutely everybody involved. I want to thank all the British public for coming forward to get boosted now.
But Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition Labour Party, drew attention back to the problems within the ruling Conservative Party.
Can I take this opportunity to make clear to the Prime Minister that if further votes are needed to save lives and protect the NHS, Labour MPs will follow my leadership and we will always put the national interest first. Can I ask the Prime Minister to get his house in order so he can say the same about the members behind him?
Let's now cross to London and to our correspondent Tig Enright. Tig, so Boris Johnson, he's really stuck to the script today, pushing once more for people to obviously get vaccinated. But the UK has now recorded its highest ever daily number of infections since the pandemic began. Is there a feeling that more needs to be done, perhaps?
There is, of course, Mariam, and indeed some people do believe that more restrictions will ultimately be announced by Boris Johnson before Christmas. Let's not forget that on Sunday night he warned the nation that a tidal wave of Omicron could be on its way. And of course, worth pointing out that other parts of the UK, such as Scotland, which looks after its own public health affairs, have already gone further and are asking people, for example, to minimise their contacts with other households in the run-up to Christmas. And indeed, in the past few days, even a spokesperson for Boris Johnson's government, a Downing Street spokesperson, said that there probably would be a need to put more restrictions in place before Christmas. But of course, since then, with the events in Parliament last night, it's very hard to do so when so many of Boris Johnson's own Conservative MPs have delivered such a humiliating blow against him and rejected the need for further restrictions, the latest restrictions, which have now come into place with the support only of the opposition Labour Party. So for now, the government messaging remains the same, encouraging people to go out and get their booster dose and to stick to the requirements, the regulations which are in place right now. Mariam?
Tig, you mentioned there Boris Johnson's humiliating blow. It really couldn't have been easy for him to face MPs after, of course, that rebellion. Where does he go to now?
Well, as he said to Parliament today, he will try to carry on and keep working to contain the pandemic, but undoubtedly he has been wounded by this historic blow during the history of his administration, the biggest rebellion he's ever faced. You know, he faced some pretty withering remarks from the leader of the opposition, but of course the greatest pain was really inflicted upon him by those 100 or so of his own MPs. Let's not forget, this is the Prime Minister who secured the biggest majority in living history, in modern history for the Conservative Party, a majority of 80 seats when the country went to vote just over 2 years ago. Now he's had 100 of his MPs turn against him. Now, while this doesn't trigger any kind of automatic process, it does continue or start a process of potential momentum against him, because once MPs get a taste for rebellion and perhaps a taste for the glory of rebellion and perhaps minimal consequences, chances are they could stick to it, and once indeed potential replacements within the senior echelons of the Conservative Party sense some weakness, sense an opportunity for them to perhaps replace him, well then you get moves potentially against him. And there is another potential significant event coming up tomorrow, a by-election in a very traditionally safe Conservative seat. And some speculation that actually the Conservatives could lose it or might only scrape a victory. And if that does turn out to be the case, that could be another nail in the coffin of Boris Johnson's political or prime ministerial career, because his tenure is based on Conservative MPs' belief that he is a vote winner. And if it turns out that he no longer has that status, well then it could be the end of days for him.
Well, let's see if it is going to be that way or not. Tiger Enright, thank you so much. Russia's jailed opposition leader Alexei Navalny has been awarded the EU's prestigious Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought. His daughter Daria collected the award on his behalf. Pedro Sakadura reports.
This year's Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought has been awarded in absentia to Russian activist Alexei Navalny. The 45-year-old is in jail in Russia, accused of parole violations. A price his family claims he's paying for speaking out against Vladimir Putin's rule. In Strasbourg, Navalny's daughter accepted the EU's top human rights prize in his name, while renewing her calls for his release and asking MEPs for further support.
This might actually be what the nightmare of myself and my family looks like. Me traveling from different conferences and summits, giving speeches in my dad's name while he is in jail. And I will continue traveling, meanwhile reading articles about the horrible conditions my dad is being held in. It's not like there's much to do about it, so I travel and speak, and he continues to be held in confinement.
A fierce Kremlin critic, Navalny has fought for democracy, transparency and against corruption in Russia. His chief of staff to the 2018 presidential election campaign told Euronews Navalny's health condition is stable for the time being. He added, this recognition has a special meaning for the activist.
He reacted that he feels not only honored, but also that he feels a lot of responsibility. Because, well, it is probably the first time then fight against corruption has been recognized as a human rights fight, which is indeed so. Fight against corruption is a human rights fight.
Russian observers say the award doesn't mean Navalny will be freed. Last year, the Sakharov Prize went to Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. Her husband has just been jailed for 18 years by a court in Minsk for inciting hatred and social unrest. Pedro Sakadura, Euronews, Brussels.
Time now for a short break, but coming up, the new German Chancellor Olaf Scholz makes groundbreaking pledges. Find out more after the break. Germany's new Chancellor Olaf Scholz has outlined bold economic plans to make the nation greener. In his first address to the Bundestag since being sworn in, he pledged to push forward the deadline to phase out coal from 2038 to 2030. The country is aiming to be carbon neutral as early as 2045, with the new traffic light coalition planning to take a harder line to fight climate change. Scholz says renewable energies will fill the gap that fossil fuels leave behind. Well, for more, we're now going to talk to our reporter, Kate Brady, who's in Berlin. So, Kate, Olaf Scholz wants Germany to be fit for the future, and he's really set out some really bold plans for the economy and to make it more sustainable.
Absolutely, and I think it's worth pointing out as well today that he reiterated once again that climate change, or tackling climate change, was certainly going to be a key priority across all departments. And so that's certainly a change in rhetoric, at least. In previous governments, there's been a lot of criticism for the fact that it seemed for a long time climate change and tackling climate change was seen very much as an issue that only the Environment Ministry should really be busying itself with. So change in rhetoric. Now the big question is whether or not this new coalition government will really be able to push through all of the plans that it wants to over the next 4 years. And of course, as you mentioned already, one of the key issues is going to be the phase out of coal-fueled energy 8 years earlier than planned. Another big plan, for example, as well, is that the government wants to see some 15 million fully electric cars on the roads here in Germany by 2030. So there was a big focus on the transition to renewable energy today. And of course, that has also prompted some concerns, some fears, particularly on the societal impact, what that might mean for jobs in the long term and also the quality of life. So Scholz at least tried today to placate some of those concerns, saying that the transition to renewable energies should certainly benefit everyone and that the financial burden should be shared equally across the people here in Germany as well.
Kate, all these plans sound really brilliant. Going green is always a good thing, but how is the government going to pay for all of these great ideas?
Well, already since the coalition deal was announced, there's been criticism from both the left and the right of Germany's opposition. And the bottom line is that this criticism focuses on the plans to fund some of this public investment through taking on more debt. So the Conservatives say that this is simply financially unsustainable, while on the left they want to see higher taxes for the wealthy. That's already been ruled out by the coalition. So as you say, where is this coming from? Well, we already know that some 60 billion euros has been earmarked for what's being called future investment, and that also covers climate change. And that actually came from some money that's already been borrowed and has been approved, and that was originally put aside to help ease the burden of the pandemic on businesses. But now the government has some money left over and wants to invest that in the future.
All right, thanks, Kate. Now, staying with Germany, German police have conducted a series of raids against a group of people opposed to pandemic restrictions and COVID-19 vaccines. The suspects had allegedly threatened to kill a state governor and other German officials. Matthew in the Cube has more.
Well, Mariam, as we told you just yesterday, we are still seeing across Europe violence and threats of violence related to conspiracy theories and misinformation about COVID-19 vaccines and the pandemic itself. And now German authorities say they have uncovered an alleged plot to assassinate a state governor. Police in the eastern region of Saxony conducted a series of raids early on Wednesday morning. These raids targeted, they said, a group of people who were prepared to commit a serious act of violence. This investigation was launched after the work of ZDF television in Germany, who infiltrated a group of 100 people on the online messaging service Telegram. In this Telegram group, suspects were sharing far-right content as well as their opposition to vaccines and pandemic restrictions. And alleged audio messages also contained threats to use armed force and attack members of the regional government. One of their alleged targets was this man, Michael Kretschmer, the state governor for Saxony and a man who has recently voiced his support for pandemic restrictions. German police say they have investigated 6 people in this Telegram group and also uncovered a series of weapons. But Saxony is Germany's least vaccinated state. We've previously seen protests there against COVID-19 restrictions. Kretschmer himself has said that these kind of threats towards officials, scientists and journalists will not be tolerated. And indeed, Marianne, the German new Chancellor, and Olaf Scholz, has also himself said that these kind of extremist minority will not be tolerated and will be pursued to the furthest extent of the law.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Matthew. The leaders of Ukraine, Georgia and Moldova have lobbied the European Union to let them begin negotiations to join the bloc. The Eastern Partnership Summit in Brussels is a precursor to a leaders' summit in the Belgian capital on Thursday. And now we're joined by Euronews correspondent Effie Kutsakosta, who's in Brussels. So, Effie, Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova, they want to join the EU, but the bloc has talked down enlargement in recent years. So, is there any change?
My answer, Mariam, is clear. No, nothing has changed when it comes to EU enlargement or accession process. Of course, we know that Putin is trying to maintain its influence on these post-Soviet democracies and, of course, erase any hope of them joining the EU or NATO. And the EU is replying all the time that, of course, it's their right to decide their future and their strategic alignments. But, of course, it's clear that this doesn't mean that the way for them to join the bloc is open. The EU Commission spokesperson said it clearly last week that this process concerns only the Western Balkan countries and not the Eastern Partnership countries. This relationship is governed actually by deals, by financial deals, and that's why the EU will mobilize some billions in order for investments for the countries that further want to progress. This is actually the reality, and of course they are trying to find a way in order to put a security angle in this relationship, a way to support these countries with their problems, to keep their sovereignty or peace, but supporting them with an umbrella or with other political initiatives, but not with them joining the EU in the near future, not even in the further future.
Now, Effie, the presidents of France, Ukraine and the German Chancellor met on the sidelines of this summit to discuss the Ukraine conflict. Are they dialling up the temperature on Russia?
Sure, of course, France and Germany are overseeing with Ukraine and Russia the Minsk agreement process, which, of course, to put an end to this conflict, which Moscow seized Crimea, and now we see all this massive military build-up near the Ukrainian border. Of course, it's very important to find a common line on that, but there are two big question marks on that. We've seen that there are warnings by the EU against Russia in joining the United States and the UK in imposing new and severe economic sanctions, but the two question marks are for Germany. First one is that Zelensky, the Ukrainian presidency, accused last week the German government under Merkel for blocking the shipment of weapons by NATO member states to the country in order to defend itself. And of course the second one, and the biggest one, is Nord Stream 2, the pipeline which connects Germany to Russia. It's not yet operational, but there is a lot of pressure, especially by the United States, on Germany to put an end on that and threaten Russia with this strategic project.
Well, let's see what happens at tomorrow's Leaders Summit. Effie, thank you. We're going to take a short break, but still to come, a rise to Lewis Hamilton. We'll have more on that story after the break. Lewis Hamilton may have been denied his Formula One title at the weekend, but the Mercedes racer has been recognised for his contribution to the world of racing with a knighthood. Andy Rubini has more.
Lewis Hamilton has been knighted in recognition of a glittering career in motorsports just 3 days after he was denied an 8th Formula One driver's title. The Mercedes racer, who controversially lost the 2021 crown to Red Bull's Max Verstappen at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, received the honour from Prince Charles during a ceremony at Windsor Castle. Hamilton becomes the 4th F1 driver to be knighted, following in the footsteps of Jack Brabham, Stirling Moss and Jackie Stewart, and the first to be awarded the honour while still competing. Joined by his mother Carmen Lockhart, the 36-year-old was all smiles despite significant question marks still surrounding the season finale. Mercedes have said they intend to appeal after stewards rejected 2 protests they made regarding the handling of events by race director Michael Massey, and have until Thursday to trigger that option.
And that's all we have for you tonight. Take care. Bye-bye.